So this time around we want this button, eventually the button on the room pages, but we want this button when we click on it not to display a toast. We want it to display the kind of form that we see right here with the nice pop-up calendars and so on and so forth. And we can do that. And we can do that by making our module smarter. So I'll go back to my code. Here's where we left off last time. We have this attention toast, which calls this prompt module because we've named a variable attention and stored the value of this module into it. We need to create a new function as part of this module, and we will call that function custom because we never know what kind of HTML we're going to display in that pop-up. Right now we're going to put a search form, but later on we might use something else. So as is the case before, it takes a parameter C and we need to define some values for that. So we go const and we give it some names. So message will be what we want to display in there, and we'll make that a default to nothing. And title, we'll make that default to nothing as well. Those have to be equal signs, not quotes. So let's fix that. Great. And that's going to be stored in C. And then we need another constant. And here we're going to put value form values. So we're going to take whatever's put into that form and do something with it. So we want to fire the suite alert. So let's go over to the suite alert documentation to find that again. Suite alert. And let's look at the documentation under examples. Input types. So all the way down at the very bottom of input types, it gives me an example for how I can do something like this. Multiple inputs. And that's what I want. I want two inputs. I want them beside each other. I don't want them one on top, but I want nice labels and I want a pop-up calendar. But this seems to be the kind of feature that we want. And when I click that, it shows me what you've entered into it. So I could just copy this whole thing and use that as a starting point and get rid of what I've typed already and paste it in here. Now when I do that, you'll notice that the word await is underlined, and it says the await operator can only be used in an async function. And that's an asynchronous function. And that's, well, what do I do here? Well, it's really quite easy. You go in front of the word function for custom and give it the type async. There, and now that error goes away. So let's think about what we want to do here. I don't want this HTML at all. I want to take the HTML that I'm passing it, which I'm storing in the variable message. So I can just get rid of that and put MSG, which will be whatever we pass it when we call it with our one line of code. So we have a title. We want that again not to be hard-coded to multiple inputs. We want that to be title, whatever we specify. And if we specify nothing, that stays empty. So that's no problem. And we have some other things I'm going to put in here as well. One thing I don't want is I don't want the backdrop. So I'll set that to false. That's that darkening of the background screen, and it's just not something I want here. And focus confirm I'll leave to false. And do I want to show a cancel button? Well, yeah, because sometimes I might click on that button and say, well, I don't really want to search on this room. Maybe I'll look at a different room. So there's another option I could put in here saying show cancel button, which will be true. Okay. Now, here I'm calling some HTML that I've just deleted. So if you go back and look at the suite alert documentation, they're saying get element by ID swal input 1, which refers to the HTML up here. So that's not what I wanted to do right now. Well, how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to create some HTML. Let me come up here to where I'm going to call this, and let's create some HTML. And we're going to store it in a JavaScript variable. So what's it going to look like? Well, first of all, let's give it a name. Let's call it let HTML equal, and then I'm going to use backtick quotes. And the nice thing about this is it means that I can have HTML on multiple lines or values on multiple lines without having to chop them up and put quotation marks and plus signs and everything else. So I'm just going to put some HTML in here. And it's going to be equal to a form, because this is a form. And I'll give it an ID, and I'll call that ID check availability form. And this is going to have an action, but I don't know what it is right now, so I'll leave that empty. And the method is going to be, well, we'll make it post. We're not going to do anything with it until we actually hook it up to a handler, but we have to give it something. And I'll put no validate in there. Might not actually use that, but it's not going to hurt to put it. And I'll have a class of needs validation, which I might not use right now, but you never know. And of course, that has to have a closing tag. And then inside of that, I'm going to have a div class equals form row, because I want these things to be beside each other. And underneath that, I'll have a div class equals call to hold the first one, the start date. And inside of that, I will have a div class equals form row again, just like we did last time. And I'm going to give this an ID of reservation dates modal. And then inside of that, I will have my div class equals call. And then I'm going to have an input. And this will be my start date. And I'll make it required. And I'll put class equals form control to make it look like the nice bootstrap input. The type will be equal to text. The name, I'll make this start. And the ID, I'll make start. And I'll give it a placeholder, just like I did in the last time we built this form. All right, and then I'll close that call, and I'll have another call. And I'll just copy and paste this to make it faster. Copy, paste, and this will be end, not start, and end, not start, and departure. All right. Then I need to close my form row. Then I need to close my call. And then I need to close the wrapper div for the form row. All right, so that should be it for the HTML. Now I've given it a name of start and an ID of start, a name of end and an ID of end. So let's go back down to our JavaScript and think about this. So for the purposes of this exercise, all we have to do is get start and end, I believe. Yeah, start and end. So start and end. And save that. Okay, so let's go down here and see how close we're getting. So we have this thing we're calling custom, and we want it to be called by custom. And we go back up to our top where we're calling this, and where is it? Here it is. So custom, and the message will be not oops, it'll be this variable HTML that I just created. All right, let's save that and see what happens. So I go back over to here, and I find my page, and I reload this and see if we're getting close at all. Hey, that looks not bad at all. Maybe we should put a title in there so we can cancel this. So let's call it with the title. Choose your dates. And save that. And reload this. And open it. Hey, that's not bad. We're getting there. Now we don't have any calendar yet at all. We need to somehow tell it to open these, open a calendar when I open this page. So let's go back here and see how we can do that. Well, if we go back down to our JavaScript, what we want is after or just before it displays this HTML that's stored in the variable message and is called here, we need to call some JavaScript. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's go back to our documentation on Suite Alert and see if there's anything that will allow us to do this. Okay, so let's see, methods. Maybe it's got something here. We want it to search just before it opens. So let's just look for the word open. Hey, look at that. Will open. So let's see what will open does. Let's copy that, find it. Will open. Pop-up lifecycle hook. Synchronously runs before the pop-up is shown on the screen. That's exactly what I want. So let's put a function in here, or a call to will open. And what's it going to look like? Well, will open is going to, just like pre-confirm, run this way. And what do we want it to do? Well, we want it to display that pop-up calendar. So we can do it the same way we did on the other screen. We can just say const element, which is just a variable. I'm just going to call it that, equals document get element by ID. And what did I call that? I think I called it reservation dates modal. Let's make sure. Yeah, reservation dates modal. So there, let's copy that. We're getting that element by ID. Back down here, reservation dates modal. So we're getting a reference to that element. And then we want to call our date picker. RP range picker equals new date range picker on the element. And then in curly brackets, format. We use the same format we did last time. Year, 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 month, month, day, day. And show on focus, I'll set to true. Okay, so that means when you click on it, you should see it. So that should, hopefully, open the date picker. It's probably not going to, but let's find out. So let's give it a try. Reload the page, click on it. So it automatically opened my calendar and it stuck it behind this modal. Well, that's not exactly what I want. I don't want it to open automatically. Well, let's do the easy one first. So let's inspect this page. So I'll bring up my tools, find my inspector, and click on this actual, I'll see if I can get this whole calendar highlighted. I'll get me close enough. So this appears to be in a div with the class of date picker. Now, we haven't actually gone through CSS in great detail yet, but we need to do a little bit right now. I need to override the default class, CSS class, for the div date picker right here, which is the whole calendar, and I need to change it so that it displays on top or closer to us than the actual modal, and that's called z-index. Well, we can fix that pretty easily. So let's go back to our code, and we'll go to the very top of the screen, and we'll just put in .date picker, D-A-T-E-P-I-C-K-E-R, and we'll give it a z-index. I don't know how high it's supposed to be, but the bigger the number, the closer to the top of the screen or the front of the screen, the closer to us that it is. So I'll put 10,000 in there, and hopefully that'll do it. Save that, reload this page, open this up, there. So now it's displaying at least where it should be, but I don't want this to fire automatically. And what's making that happen? Well, what's making it happen, you notice the blue around this? Firefox puts blue around it, so does Chrome. If your browser doesn't, you'll at least see the blinking cursor in there. What this means is that SweetAlert automatically puts the focus in the first element on this dialog, and I don't want it to do that. Well, I mean, I can't really stop it from doing that, but I need to make sure that when this dialog fires, when the modal comes up, that date picker doesn't automatically display the calendar. So how am I going to do that? Well, we need to look at another lifecycle hook that's part of this, okay? So what I'm going to do is change my HTML. I'm going to make this input disabled, which means it can't take the focus. I just do that by putting the word disabled in there. And I'll do the same thing for the second one. Otherwise, it'll probably just display the calendar there for the end date. So let's save that, reload this. I can close my inspector now because I'm not looking for HTML or CSS. And it should pop the dialog and not pop the calendar, and these should be disabled, and they are. Okay, so now at least I've got it so it doesn't show the calendar. But I want, after this dialog comes up, I need to get rid of that disabled attribute on both of those inputs. So how am I going to do that? I'll go back down here and use another lifecycle hook. So if we go back to our SweetAlert, you'll see there's another one that's called did open. I'm going to just search for it, did open. And this says pop-up lifecycle hook. Asynchronously runs after the pop-up has been shown on the screen. All right, so that's easy enough to do. That's exactly what I want. So I will now put here a call to did open. And all I want it to do, we need to use the same syntax that we did for the other ones. So empty brackets, the pointer, and inside these double quotes, all I want to do is to say document, get element by ID, start, and then I want to remove the attribute disabled. And the JavaScript to do that is, not surprisingly, called remove attribute, and the attribute I want to remove is disabled. And I'll do the same thing for end. So what it's going to do, when this is called, it's going to call it with the title that I've provided, whatever HTML I provide. I'll turn the backdrop to false. I'm not going to confirm the focus button or put the focus on the confirm button. I am going to show a cancel button. Before it opens, it's going to call the date picker, initialize the date picker on the element with the ID of reservation dates modal. So that's the wrapper around the two inputs. Then I specify the date format and whether or not I want it to show on focus to say true. And then, after it's opened, it's going to remove the disabled attribute on the start and the end inputs. So I save this. I go back here. This should work. Let's reload this. Pop it up. And there's my calendar. Now let's make sure it actually chooses dates. So I'll choose November the 23rd, and then I'll choose November the 24th. And then when I click OK, because all we're telling it to do right now is just to show us what was entered, on pre-confirm, it's going to return whatever's in the start and whatever's in the end. So hopefully, when I click OK, I get my start and I get my end. There it is, November 23rd, November 24th. All right, so we can use that on our room button, or the button on our room pages. So it doesn't do anything yet, and I'm not going to bother moving it now until I actually chop up the HTML and create our Golang templates, but it seems as though we have the functionality we need to be able to search that, or to display that search form in a pop-up dialog. All right, almost time to cut things up and put them into Golang templates.